Take the Lord Marshal's offer and bow.
I bow to no man.
I mean, there is just no hiding that this is a Vin Diesel performance. Folks, lately on this channel, you might say that we've been a little bit obsessed with Vin Diesel. After covering his run of XXX movies and figuring out why he failed to return to the franchise only to make a comeback only to not be well received, it kinda got me thinking that there's another Vin Diesel franchise or series of movies at the very least that remains unexplored here at JoBlo. Folks, I am talking about the Chronicles of Riddick. This is a sequel to the movie Pitch Black, and it takes place before the events of the film Riddick, which came out years later. I see this as Vin Diesel's other attempt to latch on to a new franchise when the future of the Fast and the Furious saga was uncertain. But let's not let that be a statement on the quality of this movie, which, I don't know, does it hold up? You know what, let's pass it over to Chris Bumbray and find out.
In Hollywood, there's no greater risk than mounting a vanity project. I think you know the type. When a director or star achieves superstar status, they cannot resist the temptation to turn their pet project into a film, no matter how poorly conceived or uncommercial it may be. When a star gets that big, chances are they're going to find someone to fund their movie, with notable recent examples being John Travolta's terrible Battlefield Earth, Chris Pine's unwatchable Pool Man, or The Weeknd's recent flop, Hurry Up Tomorrow. Somewhat in that vein, but perhaps not as egregious, is the way star Vin Diesel, whenever his stardom hit a peak as opposed to the many valleys in his career, used the opportunity to try and make his favorite character, Riddick, into a household name.
Convert now, or fall forever.
To be fair, one can see why Vin Diesel might hold the character in high regard, with the original Pitch Black arguably the first true Vin Diesel vehicle. He'd been around for years before, having shown up in Saving Private Ryan and a few other movies, but in Pitch Black, we had all the Diesel trademarks, including the shaved head, the ripped physique, and the growled dialogue.
I'm just wondering if I don't need a bigger piece of bait.
Co-written and directed by David Twohy, who also had a writing credit on The Fugitive and had done the well-regarded sci-fi flick The Arrival, this low-budget science fiction movie wasn't originally meant to get much of a theatrical release, but it was championed by early internet film critics such as Harry Knowles and here on JoBlo at a time when that was really kind of a big deal. The film was a surprise sleeper hit, earning close to $40 million domestically and paving the way for Vin Diesel to star in The Fast and the Furious. When that movie and its follow-up XXX proved to be major hits, Diesel, now minted as a megastar, opted not to make the Fast and Furious sequel, Too Fast, Too Furious. Instead, he convinced Universal Pictures, the Pitch Black right holders, and the Fast and Furious producers to greenlight a Pitch Black sequel that would be wildly ambitious compared to the original. The result was a movie that almost killed Vin Diesel's career, but still didn't dissuade him from returning to the character again and, yes, even again.
I bow to no man.
Now, one thing should be acknowledged. The Chronicles of Riddick isn't exactly a Pitch Black sequel. While it did have returning characters and callbacks, it was meant to connect with a wider fan base, which is why Universal Pictures upped the budget from the original's $23 million to one that would be well over $100 million. This was truly meant to be an event film. So why did the studio agree to all this? There are a few reasons. One was that at the time, Vin Diesel really looked like he was going to be the next megastar in the mold of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You almost had me. You never had me. You never had your car.
Given how well the Fast and the Furious and XXX did, studios thought that Diesel was a generation-defining icon, as at the time, the movie star seemed to be on its decline, and right now, one could argue that the movie star barely even exists anymore.
I think it's a half gram heavy on the back end.
In this period, it seemed like Vin Diesel was one of the rare people that could just bring in an audience on the force of his personality and presence alone, and that's a rare thing. So you can see why they thought he had captured this X factor and everybody wanted to exploit it. They simply wanted to be in business with him and they let him do whatever he wanted, and it seemed that what Vin Diesel wanted to do was a fantasy film. But lucky for him, fantasy was all the rage at the box office at the time thanks to the mammoth success of the Lord of the Rings series.
You bow to no one.
Diesel, who really loved playing Dungeons & Dragons apparently, and his returning collaborator David Twohy pitched expanding Riddick's origins, giving him a mythical background that could span a whole franchise. that they would call the Chronicles of Riddick. This was only meant to be the first in what would be at least a trilogy, and in this one, we learn that Riddick is the last descendant of the Furians,
Sister, they don't know what to do with just one of me.
a race of warriors killed off by the evil necromongers, whose leader, Colm Feore's Lord Marshal, is prophesied to die at the hands of a Furian. Thus, instead of the alien clone the original was, this was to be a universe-spanning epic packed to the gills with the kind of prestige actors you'd find in a legit fantasy movie, including Dame Judi Dench, Thandie Newton, and even a legit Lord of the Rings star, Karl Urban, who would play an antagonist. The premise is kind of like, let's be honest, Conan the Barbarian in space, right? Now, given the bigger budget and genre switch, the decision was made very early on to release this as a PG-13 movie and a summer tentpole to boot.
Fuck you!
With it getting a prime June release date. It seems ridiculous now, but Universal really seemed to think that audiences would catch Riddick fever and that it was going to become, I don't know, Vin Diesel's Terminator or something like that, with them even greenlighting a direct-to-video animated film called Dark Fury, which would fill in the gaps between this and Pitch Black. Tooie and Diesel also expected this to be a mega hit, as confidence has never really been something that Diesel was lacking.
It don't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning.
And it was planned to be the first in a Chronicles of Riddick trilogy. Suffice to say, none of this actually happened, but Chronicles of Riddick, and it needs to be said, is not actually a bad movie at all. Sure, it underwhelmed at the box office, but it's quite watchable even if you revisit it now. Financially, it did make more than twice what Pitch Black had made, but considering the hype and how much it cost, the $57 million gross was considered absolutely disastrous. And funny enough, it actually ended Vin Diesel's brief reign as a superstar, with his follow-up films all pretty much financial disasters.
Flawless.
He made one movie called Babylon AD, especially, that got really bad headlines and seemed to torpedo his career.
You need two things to live in this business, your balls and your word. You don't have either.
With him even losing his agents at one point. The only film that actually came out that was a hit was a Disney comedy he did called The Pacifier, but a lot of people viewed that as simply a one-off. He showed them, though, when he returned to the Fast and Furious franchise and arguably became bigger than he ever had been before. That said, once he was a movie star again, he tried to get another installment in the franchise made. Indeed, he did succeed somewhat with Riddick, which returned to the low-budget aesthetic of Pitch Black and actually turned a profit. While its $42 million domestic gross was kind of poor, it almost crossed the $100 million mark overseas and seemed to do a lot better than other fantasy movies that Vin Diesel got behind around that era, including The Last Witch Hunter and Bloodshot, which, to be fair, suffered from the fact that it came out in theaters the same week that everybody caught COVID-19 and, well, the pandemic started. So I guess we never really would know if that would have been a hit or not. So Riddick didn't do all that badly, considering that the budget was kept under $40 million. In fact, a fourth film in the franchise, Riddick Furia, actually might have been filmed last year. You see, Diesel was posting a lot of photos on his Instagram showing that filming was actually underway, and it does have an IMDb entry and apparently was shot in 2024, but curiously there's very little information about it online, including who else is in the cast or whether or not it was actually completed. That said, it may be wrapped and we might be getting another Riddick movie in theaters pretty soon. And will the fourth time be the charm and finally make Riddick a thing? Only time will tell, but I'll say this. One can never count out Vin Diesel, that's for sure. And it's kind of interesting that he keeps coming back to the Riddick movies, seemingly at 10-year intervals, which is kind of cool. Who knows? Maybe when Diesel's in his 70s, or maybe when he's in his 80s, we'll still be getting Riddick movies. And who knows? At some point, one of them might actually turn out to be popular. Stranger things have happened.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.